This is Catholic Forum. I'm Bob Krebs. Gene Donnelly was the director of the Office of Communication for the Diocese of Wilmington from 1970 until he retired in the year 2000. Gene passed away on April the 17th, and just 2 weeks after his wife, Mary John, passed away. We have some folks here with us today to remember Gene Donnelly, two of his longtime friends, John McClement, and John is an account executive with Forever Media, WDEL, WSTW, and also Robin Bryson, who is with DelDOT and a former Traffic Watch director at WDEL, as well as a longtime part-time staff member here at the Diocese of Wilmington. Mm-hmm. So I've known you guys for 24 years, but it's the first time I get a chance to interview you, and we have a great topic to talk about today, which is Gene Donnelly, who we were all friends with and have very fond memories of. Before we talk about Gene, tell us a little bit about yourself, John. What did I miss in your introduction?
Well, the numbers don't add up, because I'm only 40 years old, but I've spent a lot of time in this business, like 48, I think, or something, if I count it all.
Yeah.
Come from a programming background, was on the air at a lot of places, long time in Wilmington at radio station in the 70s, early 80s, and worked in Baltimore, Philly, Virginia, a couple places, Maryland. Then did the sales and marketing end, general sales manager stuff, and so I got the best of all the business. I've got the programming end of it and also the marketing end of it, so I know it inside out. It's in my veins. It's in my life. It's not a job. Mm-hmm. So I enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And I spent a lot of time enjoying it with Gene.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And Robin, I guess if anybody's listened to radio in the last 30 years in Delaware, they know your name and your voice. But
well, maybe. I don't know.
You're very modest. But tell us about yourself.
I was in radio for 40 years here in Wilmington, most of it at WDEL and WSTW. Started off as a disc jockey. And then management decided they wanted traffic reports. They moved me into that, and I did that for over 25 years before leaving the company. The last 3 years, I've been working for DelDOT in community relations.
Good. Awesome. Terrific. Thanks. So now that we got to know you a little bit, tell us how you met Gene Donnelly. Robin, why don't you start us off?
I met Gene Donnelly right here. Well, I was working at WDEL, and Kate, who was in our newsroom, was working part-time for Gene at that point, and she was looking for somebody to replace her, and she asked me if I'd be interested, so I came over and talked to Gene, and that's how I met him, and I got the job.
And what year was that?
I don't know.
A long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
So what was your position? What were the things you were doing here?
Well, I worked here in the studio, duplicating, recording programs and duplicating them to send out to the different radio stations throughout the diocese. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we sent a lot of tapes out to different stations, much fewer than I think happens now, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But that was my basic job here.
Right. And John, how about you? How did you meet Gene?
Well, I came up from Charlottesville on this particular trip to Wham's, which was the top 40 station in Wilmington in the middle 70s, which no longer exists. Right. And I met Gene there because he made the rounds with all the radio stations because in his job, he was first of all a radio guy in Baltimore. But he did some work with us with public affairs programs and the like. And also he was in the Delaware Media Association, which was our fledgling, I don't know how you say that, but an upstart group of people in the Wilmington area. And he was with me on that in a little bit later on. So we have a history that goes back to the mid-'70s.
Yeah. But both of you started as a professional relationship, but it switched, it changed into a friendship.
It blossomed into a real friendship, yes.
Yeah, tell us about that. How did that happen? Or
you just, through various happenings, you get to know the family members.
Right.
One thing that I did while I was doing traffic reports in the wintertime, Mary John was a nurse at St. Francis Hospital, and you wake up and there's a lot of snow on the ground or ice on the ground. She didn't want to drive in to the hospital herself, so she'd call me and I'd pick her up and take her into the hospital. And just
That's
doing
cool.
things like that.
Yeah.
Also, we knew each other very well, even 20 years ago. But through my wife, they had held a surprise 50th birthday party for me at their house.
Oh, wow. I wasn't invited to that.
I don't know why.
Yeah,
Sorry, Bob.
I don't know if I was around then. I don't know. Well, maybe.
Let me know when my 50th rolls around.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can. And same thing kind of happened to you. A professional relationship turned into friendship.
Well, I think our whole industry is familial anyway. Everybody's a friend in the business, and then we end up hanging together doing different things. And one of the things that they were famous for is their Christmas Eve party, and I'd have to go there to the house. When I say that tongue in cheek, because she'd be grabbing Mary John would make boxes of cookies, and if I wasn't there to get the cookies or accept the cookies, then she'd send Jean over to my front door with her cookies every year. But
Were you neighbors?
Several developments over.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they were just a great couple.
Yeah.
And they're great. You ask how we got to be friends. Sometimes if you stop to think about it, you don't know how you became friends.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They were the type of people that you just started to mesh with.
Right.
And Mary, and I don't want to get off the track on Jean too much, but Mary John, I'd look out my front yard, and there's Mary John on her hands and knees in my garden plucking weeds. And I'm saying, you're embarrassing me. Get out of there. These got to get cleaned up. That's what they were. That's what they were like.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't talk about Jean without talking about Mary John, because they were such a couple. And back 5 years ago, in April of 2019, I interviewed Jean for this program, Catholic Forum. It was the 80th anniversary of Catholic Forum, so now we've been on the air for 85 years. And I asked Jean about him coming to the diocese in 1970 and his introduction to Catholic Forum. And let's take a listen to what he said.
For 12 years, I was in radio and TV. I was always news, although I did pull a couple of DJ shows from time to time. But so I came out of 12 years of that and went into work for nonprofit organizations. When I got here, I don't believe I even knew that there was a Catholic Forum. And at that particular point, a very fine Monsignor here in the diocese who was very, very much committed to getting the word out. And so I walked in one day and somebody said, well, you have the radio program to do for this weekend. I said, what are you talking about? Of course, I knew a little bit about radio.
Sure,
but
yeah.
I didn't know I was going to be doing something.
Yeah.
And Monsignor Dewson called me up and said, I'm coming to see you and bring all the files for the office. Well, he came in with a manila folder. That was it.
That was it, huh?
So I learned on the job, if you will.
So that's typical Gene. What's it like to hear his voice? You miss him, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's still on our air.
Yeah. Talk about that.
On WDEL, on the holiday traditions that the Catholic Diocese or Catholic Cemetery sponsors, is Handel's Messiah, which people look forward to Christmas Eve and a repeat on Christmas Day. And I still have Gene doing the breaks in between to tell people, who's sponsoring it, and you'll hear his voice. So, we did a lot of commercials together.
Yeah.
And that Catholic Forum, he got that on the air at I think all the radio stations around town, because I know it was on at Wham's as well, where he comes in with his tape every week.
Yeah.
So he did pretty well with that.
It was, I've hosted this program for 24 years, Gene for 30, So of the 85 years, we've gotten 50 of them, or so.
Yeah.
So it is amazing that this. Again, it's a topic for another day. This radio program has such a long history that we'll go into some other time. But it is amazing, and I was just talking to Robin about this just a few minutes ago. But before we started recording, the media landscape has changed so much. You talked about how the program would be on many radio stations, and but now that's just not the case. But
Right.
now we have things like YouTube, and we have podcasts and things
Right.
as well. But there were other programs other than Catholic Forum that Gene was involved in producing and distributing. Tell us about that, Robin.
There was one program called EcuNews. There were two versions of it, a 5-minute version and a 15-minute version. And both versions went out to a lot of different radio stations back in the day. The other program that I remember was called North Star. Gene wasn't on that program, but it came out of his office, so he was involved with it. One of the priests would voice that program.
And that was music and commentary, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Interesting. My guests today on Catholic Forum are longtime friends of Gene Donnelly, John McClement and Robin Bryson. And Gene was also very involved with the community. He was on one of the founding trustees of Delaware Hospice. He was a member of Catholic Cemeteries Advisory Board, very much involved with our cemeteries. He was involved with the Cancer Society, the Press Association, the Maryland Delaware Broadcasters Association, and the Public Relations Society of America. And he was a very active, longtime member of Immaculate Heart of Mary Church in Wilmington. That's amazing that someone could get all that stuff done. Anything that am I leaving out? Can you think of anything?
We're coupling up again with the two.
Sure.
Mary, John, and Gene. But Gene, they were involved in everything quietly, without the brass band. They were involved with Dr. Schmidt. If you remember, she was operating Dr. Eileen Schmidt, the St. Clair van that came out of St. Francis to take care of people in the community for mammograms and things of that nature.
Right.
So I remember them going to church at what I referred to as the St. Patrick's Monastery over there off Silverside Road. And it's a renewal center,
Right.
and they would go over there on Saturday afternoon. So they were very, very dedicated to going to church, but they did stuff in a quiet way. They just took care of people and weren't looking for the accolades.
Yeah. And Mary John, she was like the head nurse at St. Francis for many
years. Yeah.
What do you think are the things that you'll remember most about Gene? Robin, you want to start us off?
His sense of humor.
Yeah.
He had a great sense of humor. Loved to tell a joke.
It could be a little off color sometimes.
Sometimes, not all,
which is fine,
right?
yeah.
Just every once in a while.
Within boundaries.
And just I remember his compassion. As John just alluded to, they had their hands in a lot of different things, working for the public, but quietly, and that was something that was really important to him.
John?
Well, the humor was the thing I was going to get into.
Yeah.
And if you want, I'll tell you
Sure.
one or two.
Yeah.
We had a talk show host from 20 plus years ago, 25 years ago or something that, let's put it this way, the bishop was not really happy with some of the subject matter that came out of his mouth. So it used to drive him crazy. So this guy he asked me one time, he said, I need 3 cemetery plots at Cathedral. I was, after what you're saying and all this stuff, I'll check with Gene. And Gene gets back to me, and He's got good news and bad news for the guy because he says he needs 3 cemetery plots, one for his mother, one for his cousin, and one for himself. The good news was, got your 3 cemetery plots. Well, what's the bad news? 2 are inside the fence, 1's outside on the dog run, and your mother's not going in there. So that was Gene's humor, and everybody has a good laugh about that stuff, and including the talk show host, because they all remember how Gene is, because he's part of us. He's one of us. He was in the radio industry, the television industry. And then the other one is Gene used to pick at him because we'd have priests in to cut commercials. And whenever they came into the production room to do a commercial for Catholic schools or Jubilee or whatever it was, they would be in their clerical garb, and he'd have them encircle the studio, the glass studio, to stare him down. So let's put it this way. Gene had a sense of humor, and everybody took it the right way, too.
For sure. One of the things that I remember, right off the bat is, coming from Baltimore. Gene was from Baltimore. I'm from Baltimore. And when we got together and first met, we went to the same high school. We went to Calvert Hall. He was a little earlier than me, but definitely. So we had that in common. It was like, okay, you got two Calvert Hall men, acting as the communications director for the diocese, one after the other. So I think when I retire, we have to look for somebody from Calvert Hall. I imagine.
It makes sense.
With a goatee, of course. Any other stories, Robin? Do you have any stories to share?
They had this is probably 20 years ago. They put a large addition on the back of their house. And unbeknownst to them, about once a week, I would go around into their backyard during the middle of the day and take a picture of the addition as it was being built. And then when it was done, I gave them a little booklet that had all the pictures in it from start to finish of the addition being built.
That was very thoughtful of you.
I have my moments.
Anything else come to mind? Yeah,
At the moment, no.
Yeah, that's about it. Well, what would you say to Gene and Mary John's kids and grandkids about their father and their mother or grandparents?
They left a real good legacy for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well put. John, anything to add to that?
They weren't stuck on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They worked hard. They
That's
took
true.
care of people in the community. They raised 2 beautiful daughters who in turn, now they have their family with grown children. And I just can't explain how nice a family this is, the Donnellys. And Gene was obviously, I got to know Mary John after this, but Gene was, as we can see, when I first met him, these kids were like, I don't know, 5 years old or something like that, and the legacy continues.
Yeah. One thing that I remember about Gene, and you mentioned this, he loved the radio business, he loved the newspaper business, all of media, and he would go throughout the entire diocese. And there are a lot of radio stations, a lot of television stations, a lot of small newspapers in the 9 counties of Maryland's Eastern Shore and the 3 counties of Delaware. Now that's changed, but he used to love to go out and
He
visit
would take
them.
a day and
Yeah.
go down through the Eastern Shore of Maryland, stopping at each of the stations.
Yep,
And dropping off the tapes.
Yep, dropping off tapes and saying hello. And
Right.
I think it was in the probably 78 or 79. I was working at a station in Seaford, Delaware, and he pops in with to say hello. So I mean, that was, who knew that years later that we'd have that other connection.
Right.
And he loved the church. I mean, he knew the priests, and the priests knew him and respected him, and there was a good camaraderie there between the clergy and Gene. So, yeah.
He'd give you good history lessons on some of these churches.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, Catholic Church in the United States, a lot of times on our end, started down in Maryland, in Baltimore, in that area. And he has the good foundation from there, and he brought that. I used to sit and we used to talk all the time, lunch or something like that, and he'd be the historian on things, and you'd just sit there and soak it up.
You were born in Delaware, though, right? You're a Delawarean.
Yeah, Delco guy,
Yeah.
a little crusty, but clay monster.
Yeah, and you too.
Another clay monster. We're going to overrun the town one of these days. It's going to be trouble. But yeah, I'm from here.
Yeah.
And yep.
So, what? You have anything you'd like to add?
I'm glad I got to know him.
Yeah.
I mean, he was an important person in my life for all those years.
Right. Absolutely. And he had an impact.
Yeah, absolutely did.
John, anything?
I take a lot of this personally, but this is what life is as it moves on. But I miss him like crazy.
Yeah.
I did see him, a week or two before, and I just, he had a life well lived, life well lived, and everybody has a positive thought about Gene Donnelly, positive.
Well, John McClement and Robin Bryson, thanks so much for spending time with us today on Catholic Forum, a program that Gene Donnelly hosted for 30 years, and sharing your memories of Gene. Thank you so much.